If you're fixing your webinar and you want to know what numbers you need to reach in order to be profitable, then this exercise I'm about to walk you through is going to help you do exactly that. And I'm going to get right into it, but I'm going to let you know the reason first why we want to do this. Now, there's a lot of advice out on the internet about webinars and things you should do and what you should be doing for your webinar. And one thing you will have noticed, if you ran a webinar, basically funnel, as it were, like this, where you started with an ad. One moment. You start with an ad. It leads to an opt-in page or landing page, which then goes to the webinar itself, and then leads to a place where people can book an application. One thing you'll notice is that there are gaps between these different steps where you lose leads. You lose people who initially showed an interest. For example, only a certain amount of people who click on your ad will opt in, and by industry standards, marketing green, only about 20% of the people who click on your ad will opt in on this page. So in fact, it gets even lower. If you go, when it comes to the webinar itself, industry standards right now, only 40% of people will press play, and of those 40%, only 10% of people will actually watch the webinar to the end and see your offer and make an application. So this is something we need to keep in mind, that when you are running a webinar, these numbers are what's between you. This is something we need to figure out in order for you to be profitable. So what is this exercise that will show you what you need to do in order to be profitable? Well, we're going to reverse engineer the numbers, and it all starts with what is the price point of your offer. Let's say that you have a $5,000 offer. And these pens are a little bit see-through, but if you want to be profitable by twice, what we call 2 times return on ad spend, or ROI, to get one client, you would need to spend $2,500 in order to be 2 times profitable on running this funnel, on running these ads. Now, if we know that per client we need to spend $2,500, $2,500, we then need to look at the percentages, the numbers of your sales call. So industry standards for having a sales call is that 70% of people will show up and 30% of people on the call will actually sign up. Now what happens is, when we're calculating this, when we're figuring out the numbers, we want to figure out how much we want to pay for an appointment in order to be profitable, how much we need to pay for someone to click play on the webinar, how much we need to pay for someone to opt in, and like what we need the cost per click to be, from someone to go from the ad to the opt-in page. If you know these numbers, you can then apply it. You can then run this webinar ad, and you can see how far off you are from being 2 times profitable, whether you're profitable or whether you're past profitable. And then you can look at what others call scaling. You can put more money into your ads and grow your business that way. But this is something we want to figure out first. So when we're figuring out the cost per booked appointment per application, in total, we want, because when we multiply percentages, they get reduced. In total, so only 21% of the people who book an application are going to become a client. And so the maths is, let me find a pen that draws well. Let me see. This draws well. So, one moment. The maths is this. It costs 2,500 per client, and we multiply it by 0.21, and what it ends up being is just over 500. So it's around $520. Now, if you can get a cost per application of $520, you know that you're good. You'll be 2 times profitable. Now, how do we get cost per application of $520? Well, if we know that only 10% of people who clicked on the webinar will book an application, then we know 10%, we have to multiply it by 0.1 or 0.10, and it's $52. So we need to actually get someone to watch the webinar for $52. Then only 20% of the people will opt in. So what you need to do is you need to actually multiply, you need to get people to press play on the webinar. So you multiply $52 by 0.40. So quick head maths, that is so that's $20.80, just about. That's how much you need to get for someone to actually press play on the webinar, to actually join you. And based on that, if only 20% of people opt in, you multiply it by 0.2%, which is, 20% or 0.2 rather, if you're doing the maths. And what this will look like is around $4.16. And the pen got worse as time went on, but $4.16. You need someone to opt in for $4.16 to watch the webinar. Now, as it is normally, the numbers of the webinar are not in your favor because of this reason. If you can, on the one hand, if this is industry average, improving these numbers is possible. You can close more sales calls from the people who show up. You can get more people to show up to your sales calls. There are different techniques around that. What we do with the ecosystem is where you have, for example, 80% of people who didn't opt in, we run strategic ads to these 80% to get them to come back to you because they had already shown an interest. And where you had 60% of people who didn't press play on the webinar, you send strategic ads, again, low-cost ads compared to what you're putting into the webinar funnel. You put in, and you target these people who showed even more of an interest but didn't move forward. And you use strategic ads to get them to come back and have conversations, make an application. So that's the strategic side of things. And then the people who didn't book an application, again, that 90%, you also send strategic ads to those leads as well. So that's something to keep in mind with this strategy. But the final thing is, once you know each of these numbers, if you know that only 20% of people opt in, this right here, $4.16, is the cost per click you need to aim for on your ads. So I'm sorry if this is a bit unviewable, but if you can get your ads to send, qualified people to your opt-in page for $4.16, and you follow these numbers here, then you know you'll be close to profitable. And what I want you to do is first of all, see whether you can put enough money into the funnel, because again, to get a client here, you would need to spend $2,000, $2,500 to verify this. If you're not in the position to do that, there are other strategies you can use. You don't have to use a webinar, but if you know you can put the money in, test this, or you're already testing this, review these numbers for your own funnel, and then you'll be able to see what changes you need to make to become profitable or even more profitable. Because when it comes time to actually get a better return on ad spend, even if you can get through this normal process, 2 times the return on your ad spend, you spend $2,500 and get $5,000 in return. There are ads you could put in place to raise that to 3 times return on ad spend, 4 times, 10 times. But this is the thing you need to do first if you are prepared to put a webinar in place and you have the funding and the setup to do so. All right? Hope that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next video.